Lay's chips. We've all seen these little packs, hopefully. Maybe some of you with kids, or maybe you kids out there have had them in your lunches. I went to go buy them in Wegmans the other day, and reminded me of, because I'm going on a camping trip with my brothers, so I want to pack up, and I thought, all these times getting these chips, and one bag is really never enough. You keep eating them and eating them, they're like air. And even when you got done eating maybe a bag a little bit bigger than this, you feel like you're still lacking something. You still want more. Lay's chips. In our first reading today, God offers us a food that will make us whole, a food that will truly satisfy. And he's offered it to these Israelites over and over again. And we find our Israelites in Going to the Promised Land, Part 2. Because they've been in exile, this time in Babylon, and God's promising them to come home to the Promised Land to give them the food, the drink that will satisfy. You see, as they've been in the exile, hanging on, God has reassured them that He wants them to choose the food that will satisfy as they come home. Because He remembers, and the Israelites remember, that they've done this once before. They've come from Egypt, they've gotten to the Promised Land, but then they've chosen not God and not His food, but they've chosen idols, and they've chosen Lay's chips. The food that won't satisfy, that they keep going back to over and over again, because they have to admit that it is appealing at first, but it never really satisfies, and they walk away empty. And God offers you and I today the food that will truly satisfy. And what is this food? It's the food that will become present here in the Eucharist, yes, but it's also grace. It's grace. It's God's very life. It's His very essence. And people think, well, Father, what does grace taste like? It tastes like joy. It tastes like peace. It's that joy and peace that when you're done eating, think of a meal that you've eaten and you stopped and went, this was really good. It really hit home. It was food for the soul. That is God's grace. And He wants us to choose it each and every day, but in particular in moments when we're encountering a choice between sin or Lay's chips and His grace, which is more than just the milk and honey that God talks about in the first reading. And good thing too, because when I was growing up, I never really liked milk and honey, so the Promised Land really didn't sound very appealing. But no, God's grace is that true food that satisfies us, puts you at peace and joy. And He's offering it to you. He knows it will make you whole, and He wants you to just ask for it. So how do we ask for it? Well, first, step one is to humble oneself. Pride is the one thing that gets in the way between us and God, because pride makes us think that we don't need that food. We can get our own food that will satisfy. And how many times do we realize when we choose sin, when we choose doing wrong, that that's not the case? We first have to humble ourselves and realize I'm in need and I can't fulfill that need. I can't satisfy myself. Humility. Next, make room. Like any good Italian, you don't eat on Sunday until the big meal, because you want to make as much room. You want to make your appetite so ready so that when you receive it, you can savor it. You can savor the meal. So you have to make room in your souls, likewise, for God. Take out the distractions that can get in the way. Even some good things that we enjoy can get in the way of us receiving the source of all good, which is God. Make room, step 2. And then step 3, ask. Ask God for the grace. How many times in our day when we're in need, we end up trying to do it on our own, which is sin, which is Lay's chips. We try and satisfy ourselves, but God's right there. He's right there waiting for you to ask for the grace, to be made whole, to be satisfied. Humility, humble yourself, make room so that you can savor the meal, and then ask for it. Because God truly desires to give you the food that will make you whole, to give you His grace. So as we come before God's altar to receive the high point of that grace, because we get to receive Himself in the Eucharist, ask for the grace. But even those who are at home right now, who are going to be partaking of spiritual communion, and even you in the pews who may be making spiritual communion, you still have an opportunity. God's not going to starve you. He's not going to starve you. He still wants you to ask for that grace. So do so, and then savor it. Realize the food that you're eating is the food that will truly satisfy. So that when you go forth from this place, like the disciples who on that mountain where they experienced the miracle of the loaves and the fishes, what does God tell them? Feed them yourselves. And the disciples, the apostles were like, no, we can't do that. So God's like, okay, I'm going to show you that the only way you can do that is if you first receive my food. And now you can go ahead and feed others with that joy, that peace which you have received from me. So receive the grace now and put aside those chips so that you, savoring the grace of God, may then go forth and feed others, and we all may be satisfied.